All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over the cardiac action potential. The cardiac action potential looks very different from the typical skeletal muscle action potential or neuron action potential. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because instead of having sodium and potassium only in play, now we're going to introduce calcium into the mix. So now sodium, potassium, and calcium are into the mix. In addition, we're actually dealing with different types of potassium channels, which we're going to go over in a second. But that is the big reason why cardiac action potential looks different. So let's begin. The first thing we observe is this white little stimulus here. This is the stimulus from the SA node, the AV node, and the Purkinje fibers, either one of them. So what we're describing here, this graph, is the muscle cells of the heart. So anywhere around the heart there are muscle cells, this is what this graph is going to represent. So what we're showing is with this white line is this muscle cell has just received an electrical signal from either the SA node, the AV node, or the Purkinje fibers. Remember that electrical heart pathway? That's what we're talking about here. So now let's talk about the first step. The first step is depolarization. Basically, the muscle cell is going to increase in voltage. How do we do that? Well, voltage-gated sodium channels are going to open. The VG is just abbreviated for voltage-gated. So voltage-gated sodium channels are going to open. So just for a second, think about which direction is sodium going to go. Are we going to go inside the cell or outside the cell? Well, since sodium is positively charged, and this graph is showing that we're going up in voltage, sodium must be going inside the cell. Because since sodium is positively charged and we're going inside, that raises the membrane potential. So let me just write here. Sodium goes inside the cell. Perfect. Now for part two. Part two is actually divided into two separate parts. The reason is because something happens first and then something else happens. And we're going to go over that right now. So when we reach around 30 millivolts, this is when the voltage-gated sodium channels will close. We open the voltage-gated sodium channels here, and we must close them right after. In addition, potassium TO channels open. What do you mean by potassium TO channels? Well, in your body, we actually have many types of potassium channels. In fact, we have so many potassium channels, we actually don't know what a lot of them do. We see them in their body, we do see them functioning, but we don't know exactly why they were even made in the first place. Why can't we just use a regular potassium channel? Why is this a potassium TO channel? Well, what researchers have found out is potassium TO channels actually respond a little bit differently to voltage. But you don't need to worry about about that here. All you need to know is that potassium TO channels open. So you're probably asking, so which direction does potassium move in? Well, we're going down in voltage. See, we're dipping down into voltage. And since potassium is positively charged and we're going down in voltage, potassium must leave the cell for this to happen. So that's exactly what we're doing. So potassium leaves the cell and it goes outside. Awesome. Okay. The next thing is voltage-gated L-type calcium channels open. So just like those potassium channels, we have different types of calcium channels. In fact, we have so many types of calcium channels. We have T, we have L, we have N, we have P, we have Q, we have R. So many types of calcium channels. This one in the heart is L-type calcium channels. So what's going to happen? Well, the voltage-gated L-type calcium channels open. So you're probably asking, which way is the ions going to move? Well, if potassium was leaving the cell, we were going outside, but notice we're trying to level off here. So there must be some kind of balancing force in electricity, and that's exactly what calcium is doing. So if potassium is leaving the cell, calcium must be coming inside the cell because that is positively charged, and we're kind of leveling off in voltage. Because let's say just for example, if calcium was leaving the cell, then it would just drop. The voltage would just drop because we have calcium, which is positively two charged, and potassium, which is positively one charge. That's a lot of positive charge leaving the cell, and you would just see a straight dip. But that's not what's happening. Instead, calcium is coming into the cell. So calcium enters the cell. Part 3. The voltage-gated L-type calcium channels close. In addition, potassium DR channels open. So this is just another type of potassium channel. Just like the potassium TO channels we talked about right here, this is just another type of potassium channel they found. So potassium DR channels open. And notice that we are going further down in millivolts. So this should tell us that since potassium is positively charged, potassium is leaving the cell. If it were to enter the cell, the membrane voltage would probably just stay the same. Would probably just stay the same or even go higher. But potassium is leaving the cell. So let me write that down. All right. Now the fourth thing is the potassium leak channels open. And what this does, it's trying to balance out the millivolts. Now we're trying to stop going lower. That's our goal. So leak channels will open, and some potassium is going to go inside the cell now to kind of balance out the voltage of the cell. And we're trying to get back to negative 90 here. And that is it. So now let's talk about the refractory periods here. Notice that we have an absolutely super long absolute refractory period and a so-so relative refractory period. Why is that? Well, if you remember from skeletal muscle action potentials, the absolute refractory period and relative refractory period were not that long. But if you also remember, we also had hyperpolarization. We were going beneath resting membrane potential. Here in the cardiac action potential, there's no hyperpolarization here. We just go straight back to resting, right? From negative 90 is resting. We're not going under. So we're not going under like this. That's a huge difference. So let's talk about it. First, why do we actually have a huge absolute refractory period? Remember, these muscle cells are located in the atria and ventricles. And the atria and ventricles fill up with blood, and then they contract to push blood throughout the body. Now, just say, for example, if we had a very short absolute refractory period and we were firing this muscle cell super, super fast, well, the atria and ventricles will never even have time to fill up with blood. So we would just be contracting them like crazy. They wouldn't be able to fill up with blood, and that would cause serious problems. Our body won't be getting enough blood to, for us to live. Our brain wouldn't get enough blood, and we would die. Because remember, the goal is to basically, of course, push blood throughout our body and deliver oxygen and other minerals and vitamins, whatever, and proteins. Well, if there's not enough oxygen in going to our brain, we're gonna die. So this is why we need to let our atria and ventricles fill up with blood. And that's why we have a huge refractory period. We're making sure that this muscle cell cannot fire any more, at least for a long time. And also think about this, is if this thing was firing super, super fast, our heart rate would be through the roof and you would die of a heart attack. Imagine having a heart rate of 300 beats per minute, right? If there was a really short refractory period, that would be a really big problem. So that's another reason. The relative refractory period is kind of short. And this is accommodated with larger, faster heart rates. For example, if you were exercising, for example, we may not wait all the way back to get to, negative 90. We maybe will we'll fire an action potential and have the muscle cell fire here again, say if you're working out. So that is why we have a little bit of a shorter relative refractory period. I hope this makes sense. And that actually concludes the cardiac action potential. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Until next time, see ya.